We took him to a psychiatrist, and within a matter of minutes, yeah, she's ADHD, and here's your drug.
Went on the Medicaid, and 5 minutes later, he was on Zyprexa.
He saw the psychiatrist and prescribed the medicine for 20 minutes.
The guy didn't even look at her. He talked to her a little bit. Now, how can you tell if somebody's ADHD or not ADHD from just a few minutes talking to her?
Next thing I know, I'm getting handed a handful of Xanax. That's how easy it is to get these drugs. Just so easy. It was just passed to me like candy. That simple.
If a person were to walk in off the street, sit down with a psychiatrist, the chances of him being prescribed a drug before he were to leave the office, I would have to put it at 100%.
Psychiatrists prescribe drugs. They might have different ways of diagnosing, they might have different ways of interacting with a patient, but it's rare to find a psychiatrist that uses no drugs.
The psychiatrists today are, in quotes, admitting they can't cure these mental illnesses, and they're therefore going to manage your illness by using a drug.
50 years ago, a person who was going through a divorce would have relied on family, friends, clergy, and even the family doctor to a certain extent for conversation to work through the issue. They certainly wouldn't have been medicated.
Isso era antes da era das drogas psiquiátricas. Os psiquiatras, ao ocuparem o degrau mais baixo da profissão médica, trabalharam quase exclusivamente em instituições mentais. Sem curas, era impossível que alguma vez fossem respeitados pelo público e os seus colegas como médicos de verdade.
Psychiatrists had for years been on the fringe of medicine. Typically, the standard doctor internist would have very low regard for psychiatrists because it was understood not to be a very clear science or art.
Psychiatrists wanted to be viewed as physicians, as doctors, and in order to be viewed as physicians and doctors, the people they dealt with had to be viewed as patients. And if doctors dealt with diseases, then their patients had to be diseased.
Psychiatrists had a wonderful opportunity, they felt, to become respected in the eyes of their peers. They raced to create a whole diagnostic book called the DSM, the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual, which was created by consensus.
A group of psychologists and psychiatrists get together, and if they have made common observations, they have a vote and they now classify a new disease. And they give it a number and it graduates into the DSM classification.
And it's a dangerous book. It's a book that has many disorders that could apply to any one of us because the disorders are not real medical diseases. And it's things that apply to nearly all of us at times. Are you afraid of meeting new people? Are you afraid to speak in front of a large crowd of people? Does it make you nervous to go and to talk to your boss about a complaint?
You can invent a mental disorder based on a checklist of symptoms, and that is exactly how the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual, the billing Bible for psychiatry, works.
Desde a primeira edição do DSM em 1952, o número de diagnósticos tem crescido grandemente. De um livro pequeno com 130 páginas, a listar 106 pertenças desordens mentais, o DSM cresceu para um volume com 886 páginas. É só através do uso deste livro que os psiquiatras podem diagnosticar, drogar e facturar por serviços. De facto, a indústria psiquiátrica atualmente usa o DSM para recolher mais de 72 milhares de milhões de dólares em dinheiro de seguradoras privadas e governamentais.
The DSM is used to diagnose and then give a label, and the label is used for billing purposes. That's how they get paid.
You have to have a term in the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual in order to then call it a disease and treat it as a disease and write a prescription for it.
And so because they can vote it in, they can create, and then the drug industry can just take over and market their drugs for those new disorders.
And those drugs were welcomed by psychiatry leaders because it made us real doctors.
Of course, first the public had to believe that there was something wrong with them, and that that thing wrong was biochemical, and that that could then be treated by a drug which was supposed to cure all.
And so it was relatively easy, I think, to say, well, look, let's start looking at mental illness as fundamentally a matter of chemical imbalance in the brain.
Chemical imbalance is a term that's used as a marketing ploy, as opposed to anything that there's scientific evidence to support.
Nobody has yet measured, demonstrated, or created a test to show that somebody has a chemical imbalance in their brain. Period.
How do you market a drug that restores the chemical balance or corrects a chemical imbalance? How can you do that in good conscience if you don't even know what one is?
The whole myth of the chemical imbalance was created to sell drugs.
E enquanto os psiquiatras e companhias farmacêuticas têm estado a usar este mito para fazer milhares de milhões de dólares, movendo vastas quantidades de drogas psicotrópicas para os corpos de clientes inocentes, o público tem pagado o preço final. Estima-se que metade de todos os americanos que cometem suicídio estão a tomar drogas psicotrópicas. Estima-se que as drogas psicotrópicas matem anualmente 2,5 vezes mais pessoas do que as que são mortas por homicídio. E a quem é que se confiou proteger o público contra estas perigosas drogas psicotrópicas? Nos Estados Unidos, é a Food and Drugs Administration, FDA, cujos painéis conselheiros de drogas psiquiátricas são dominados por psiquiatras que vão e voltam entre a indústria farmacêutica, a academia, a prática privada e governamental, a chamada porta giratória.
The revolving door at FDA is one of the primary reasons why the system that we have works so poorly. That revolving door is a direct result of the fact that a group of people with the same mindset are put into positions of being regulators and in the position of being formulators and sellers and marketers.
The panels that are formed by the FDA to evaluate these drugs, the psychiatrists who are on those panels, almost all of them have conflicts of interest where they have directly or indirectly received funding from the very industry and the very parties within the industry whose drugs they are evaluating.
So there's this tight little relationship between psychiatry, pharmaceutical industry, and FDA, where they each mutually support each other, and yet the mental health of the population does not improve.
Pegue, por exemplo, no painel de avaliação de drogas da FDA, que aprovou o antidepressivo Paxil. Todos os psiquiatras nesse painel têm laços financeiros com a indústria farmacêutica. E estes conflitos de interesses têm sido suficientemente desenfreados para levar a uma investigação do Congresso.
When I check these advisory committees who make recommendations to the FDA, and they're always approved after the advisory committee, I found that there were conflicts of interest. I found that many of the people on the advisory committees had never filed a proper report on stocks and bonds that they owned that might be viewed as a conflict of interest. And they're by law supposed to do that.
E esta rede de conflitos financeiros de interesses entre a psiquiatria, a indústria farmacêutica e a FDA tornou-se ainda mais fixada em 1992, após a passagem do Ato de Cota do Utilizador de Prescrição de Drogas, do inglês Prescription Drug User Fee Act, também conhecido como PDUFA. Através desta lei, poder-se-ia pagar à FDA uma cota de $100 mil por droga para assegurar que os medicamentos psicotrópicos seriam passados rapidamente através do processo de aprovação e para as mãos de pessoas a prescrevê-los mais depressa do que nunca.
Congress told the FDA, your job is no longer to make sure drugs are squeaky clean safe before they get out on the market. Your job now is to hurry up and get new drugs on the market faster.
It acted to set the priorities of the FDA, so that if there was a fee paid for a particular drug approval, it could be put on the fast track and rushed to market with less than the usual scrutiny that the FDA would give it.
E esta linha rápida trocou a segurança por vendas. Desde a passagem da PDUFA, o tempo gasto na avaliação de drogas decaiu de quase 2 anos, em 1992, para apenas 6 meses, 4 anos mais tarde. Entretanto, o número de novas drogas lançadas para o público duplicou. Apesar da linha rápida ser desastrosa para a segurança do público, Esta reúne grandes lucros para a psiquiatria e a indústria farmacêutica, porque quanto mais cedo uma droga for aprovada, mais depressa fará dinheiro. E é muito dinheiro. Diariamente, a média de drogas psicotrópicas gera mais de 7,7 milhões de dólares. Uma droga, Zyprexa, atinge quase 12 milhões de dólares diariamente. E apesar da FDA agora cobrar mais de $1 milhão por cada nova inscrição de drogas, a linha rápida farmacêutica não mostra quaisquer sinais de abrandamento.
If you look at the relationship between the FDA, the pharmaceutical industry, and the psychiatrists, there's some kind of game that they're playing there. And what is the game? Well, you could say it's money, definitely money.
And when you follow the money, you realize that there is no money in health. There's big money in disease.
That's why all you hear about is managing disease or treating disease. You don't really talk about curing disease.
And so psychiatrists have become mainstream doctors in America. And that is because of the pharmaceutical industry. They can thank the pharmaceutical industry because they become mainstream and because they have a lot more money than they used to. And the drug industry can thank them because now they have thousands of soldiers in their army distributing these drugs to everybody.
Desde a criança mais pequena ao cidadão idoso de maior idade, ninguém está imune de qualquer das centenas de desordens fictícias inventadas pelos psiquiatras que alimentam uma indústria farmacêutica de psicotrópicos multibilionária. E diariamente, os psiquiatras estão a considerar ainda mais possibilidades. E o que é preciso? Outra etiqueta psiquiátrica.